When Kara Marlowe was 7, she scratched a girl's face into her bedroom mirror using her mother's diamond necklace. She couldn't remember why, only that the girl had whispered something from the other side of the glass, and Kara had listened. That mirror was long gone. But last night, her daughter Iris stood barefoot in the hallway, her tiny hands smeared with blood. She pointed to the fogged-up bathroom mirror and said, "She says you remember her now." Kara hadn't said a word. She simply walked into the bathroom, turned on the lights, and saw the words etched in the condensation. "You stole my life. I'm taking it back." The Marlowes were the kind of family people used as Pinterest inspiration boards. Each December, Kara designed custom holiday cards featuring themed costumes, pastel lighting, and a scripted line of warmth signed, "With love, from the Marlowes." The cards were laminated and magnet to a dozen neighbors' fridges for months. To the world, they were picturesque. Kara, a soft-spoken children's illustrator with a portfolio full of bunnies and bedtime forests. Dean, a successful local realtor with a squared jaw, warm eyes, and a voice that made people trust him immediately. And their daughter, Iris, age 5, precocious, gentle, and unusually observant. Their home in northern Illinois was a white brick 2-story colonial with navy shutters and a perfectly symmetrical lawn. Inside, everything smelled faintly of vanilla and lemon oil. The kitchen was the heart of the house, gleaming quartz countertops, polished copper pans, carefully stacked ceramic mugs labeled Mama, Dada, and Lil One. It was the kind of home people imagined safety lived in. But underneath the gloss of it all was a subtle pressure Kara had never learned to name. An unspoken rule: keep it light. Dean didn't like low energy, as he called it. Sadness, anger, confusion, all of it had a way of being redirected or laughed off. He was too charming to be accused of cruelty, but over the years, Kara had noticed how good he was at making her doubt her own instincts. Sometimes, she'd find herself asking permission before doing anything. Painting something weird, skipping a family brunch, changing the dinner menu. It wasn't like Dean had said no. He just had a way of framing her decisions as either off-brand or a little much. Still, she told herself, they were lucky. Dean had never cheated, never yelled. He was good with Iris, taught her how to ride her bike and spell dinosaur. Most nights, he brought home takeout and massaged Kara's shoulders while she talked about her commissions. He was, by all public accounts, a great husband. But lately, Kara had felt a tremor running under the floorboards of her life. It started 6 weeks ago, the night her mother died. A phone call at 2:11 a.m. from the hospice nurse. Complications. Rapid decline. No time for goodbyes. When Kara arrived at the care facility, her mother was already zipped into a bag. Her room was filled with half-drunk tea, crossword puzzles, and a half-finished letter Kara would never get to read. The funeral was modest. Closed casket. No open grief. Dean held her hand and kissed her temple, but his fingers tightened when she lingered too long at the burial. "She'd want you to move forward," he whispered. A week later, Kara received a call from her mother's bank. There was a safety deposit box she hadn't known about. The key had been taped to the bottom of a photo frame. Inside the box, 2 old ultrasound prints, a torn hospital wristband, and a manila folder marked for Kara. The folder held no letter, just a series of records, medical forms, doctor notes, and something called a fetal absorption confirmation report. There were 2 names on the early paperwork, Baby A and Baby B, but all later records listed only one. She'd stared at the images for a long time. 2 fetuses curled in the womb like yin and yang. Then, in later scans, only one remained. Dean had read the file and laughed. Vanishing twin syndrome. It's not uncommon. You absorbed her in utero. Weird, sure, but biologically meaningless. You probably just sparked a childhood ghost story from it. He said it like it was funny. A footnote in a weird life. But it didn't feel funny. Because Kara remembered something else. A mirror, a voice, and the scratches. She hadn't thought about the scratches in decades. When she was 7, her mother had replaced the mirror in her childhood bedroom. Said Kara had ruined the old one. Kara remembered blood on her fingers and a line carved into the glass. A shape. Maybe a name? She'd always thought it was a dream. Or a punishment she'd made up. Now she wasn't so sure. She started to look more closely at Iris. Her daughter was quiet, the kind of child who studied everything. Shadows, expressions, half-sentences. Lately, she'd begun asking odd questions. Did I have a sister before? Kara had blinked. No, sweetheart. She says she came first. Who? She doesn't tell me her name. But she knows mine. Sometimes Kara would find Iris standing in front of the mirror in her room, talking to someone who wasn't there. Whispers. Pauses. Listening. She wrote it off as imagination. All kids have imaginary friends, right? But the things Iris said started to get stranger. She said your drawings used to be darker. She said you used to scream at night. She said you promised to let her out. Kara told Dean about it. He laughed. Kids are sponges. You're mourning. She's picking up your energy. It'll pass. Don't encourage it. But something didn't sit right. And Kara found herself dreading bedtime. The attic above the garage was her studio. A cozy space with wide windows, exposed beams, and a drafting table covered in pastels, graphite, and digital tablets. She'd always felt safe there. Until the heater started turning on by itself. Until the mirror above the dresser began fogging up even when the windows were open. Until she caught her reflection smiling when she wasn't. She stopped drawing at night. One morning, she found a sketch she didn't remember starting. Two girls standing in a field of crows, their faces identical, but one had no eyes. Kara didn't show it to anyone. She burned it in the fireplace after Iris asked why the twin with no eyes was angry. Dean kept asking if she'd called a grief counselor. Told her she seemed fragile. Maybe she was. Still, when she checked her phone history, she found a series of calls made at 3 a.m. to a blocked number. She hadn't made them. But the timestamps matched the times Iris had woken up crying. She told herself it was coincidence. She told herself a lot of things. But none of them explained why the mirror in the attic now had deep, vertical scratches in the corner, like fingernails dragged down glass. None of them explained why Iris had started drawing twins. One always had blood dripping from her mouth. Kara had always loved the attic. It was her sanctuary before it became something else. When they bought the house 6 years ago, she was the one who insisted on converting it. She remembered walking up the narrow staircase for the first time pregnant, dizzy from paint fumes, and imagining it filled with light, color, movement. She called it her treehouse. A place above the world, safe and still. It used to smell like cedar and lavender. Now it smelled faintly of ozone and copper. She stopped using the space regularly a month after her mother's funeral. That's when the heater began its tricks. It would click on in the dead of night and hum for hours. When she asked Dean to check the settings, he said there was no reason for it to be running. The system was on a timer, set manually, nothing automatic. Still, the room would be warm and waiting in the morning, as if expecting her. There were other things, too. Small at first. Her sketch pencils rearranged. Her tablet turned on with programs she didn't open. Drafts she didn't recall saving. She assumed she was working through grief in her sleep. Maybe unconsciously pulling late nights and forgetting them. Until she found the girl with the teeth. The drawing was charcoal, smudged with soft gradients and sharp lines. The figure was small, childlike, but with a mouth filled edge to edge with teeth, rows and rows of jagged triangles. Her eyes were blacked out completely. She wore Kara's dress from 2nd grade, one she hadn't thought of in decades, one her mother had burned in a trash barrel after Kara ruined it. Kara hadn't drawn the girl. She was certain, but the file was signed in her own digital handwriting. She tried to laugh it off, told herself it was grief again, or exhaustion. She was balancing commissions, Iris's swim lessons, her own mourning. Maybe she was slipping. People did. Artists especially. There was a long, romantic history of madness in her field. But it didn't explain the voice. It wasn't even a word, just a whisper. A consonant-smeared gasp, like breath against her neck. The first time she heard it, she turned so fast she knocked over a lamp. The second time, she stood still and waited. Nothing. The third time, she was in the attic, and she realized it wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from the mirror. She had placed the antique mirror there years ago, an old silver-framed piece from a flea market in Evanston. Slightly warped, slightly foxed, it gave the room an aesthetic balance she liked. She'd always kept it partly covered with a linen cloth to reduce glare from the window behind it. Lately, she'd started covering it completely. Then one morning, she walked in and the cloth was folded neatly beside the mirror, as if someone had removed it respectfully. That same morning, Iris refused to come upstairs. She stood at the base of the attic steps, arms crossed, lip trembling. She doesn't like when you draw over her. Kara froze. Who? The one you buried. She's mad you're still drawing animals when she gave you her teeth. Kara didn't respond. She led Iris downstairs, made pancakes, turned on cartoons. Tried to swallow the knot forming in her stomach. That night, Kara went back into the attic alone. The mirror was uncovered again. She stared into it, her own face staring back. tired, pale, older than it should have looked. She walked closer, examining the frame. That's when she saw them, scratches. Tiny at first, etched near the bottom corner. Then longer ones for vertical lines, then one diagonal across them, like someone counting days. She ran her finger over the lines. They were real. She covered the mirror again. The next morning, the linen was gone. Not folded. Gone. That day, Iris came home from preschool with red ink smeared across her fingers and sleeves. Her teacher sent a note. Iris has been fixated on drawing sisters. One drawing featured her with someone named Juliet, who has no face. When I asked who Juliet was, she said, Mommy's other baby. Kara threw the note away. That night, she checked the attic again. The mirror was fogged. Not moisture, condensation. As if the glass were breathing. When she wiped it clean, a phrase revealed itself beneath her fingertips. I didn't die. You just forgot me. She backed away slowly, heartbeat rising, neck prickling with heat. She reached for her phone. The battery drained from 57% to 0% in her hand. For the next 3 days, she didn't return to the attic. She painted in the kitchen, in the backyard, in her car. Anywhere but there. But everything she touched turned to portraits of twins. One smiling. One screaming. They showed up in trees. In shadows. In rabbit ears and storm clouds. Unintentional. Uncontrolled. Her subconscious had become infested. She knew it was Juliet. She didn't know how she knew the name. It was just there, now. Planted. Watered. Blooming behind her thoughts like mold behind wallpaper. Then came the first sleepwalking incident. Kara woke up in the attic, barefoot, shivering, holding a set of car keys she didn't recognize. The mirror was uncovered. There were new scratches, longer, more erratic. She had drawn a girl on the wall in charcoal. Same dress. Same teeth. This time, the girl's mouth was open. Something was crawling out of it. Another face. The next morning, Dean suggested she see someone. She didn't argue. Not out loud. But inside, she started to wonder if it was too late for doctors. Iris had begun sleep-talking. One night, Kara sat beside her in bed and heard the girl murmur, "She still doesn't know I remember the fire." There was no fire, as far as Kara knew. But that night she dug through her old files again. Her mother's manila folder. The medical reports. She noticed something new. A second name scratched out under Mother, Cynthia Marlowe. Under Infant B, Juliet. The original form had listed 2 mothers. One had been crossed out with ballpoint ink and correction fluid. Sloppy. Amateur. Not clinical. She pulled out the photo again. The ultrasound with 2 small bodies floating beside each other. Not curled up. Facing each other. As if listening. As if speaking. On Sunday morning, the attic mirror cracked. No impact. No earthquake. Just a sudden fracture, like lightning through the center of glass. The crack ran perfectly down the middle. Kara stared at her split reflection for a long time. Half of her looked asleep. The other half looked like it had just woken up. Kara woke with blood under her fingernails. She didn't notice at first. Not until she went to tie her hair and saw it. Rusty flakes wedged into the crescent moons of her cuticles, staining her fingertips like she'd clawed through damp earth. The bedding was clean. No signs of injury. Her own body was intact. No cuts, no broken skin, not even a scratch. But the blood was unmistakably human. She didn't scream. She didn't wake Dean. She simply sat on the edge of the bathtub and scrubbed her hands until the skin blistered. The water turned pink, then clear. Her reflection stared back at her from the bathroom mirror, pale and exhausted. Half of her wanted to believe it was a nosebleed. The other half, darker, quieter, more honest, knew better. Something had changed. Later that morning, Iris came down for breakfast wearing a red nightgown Kara had never seen before. Old-fashioned, high-necked, trimmed with lace. The tag was faded, the fabric yellowed with age. Where did you get that? Iris looked up from her cereal. It was in the attic closet. There is no attic closet. Iris didn't respond. Kara climbed the attic stairs with a dread that thickened with every step. She opened every drawer, every cabinet, scanned the room inch by inch. Nothing. But behind a bookshelf, wedged against the wall, was a small, recessed panel she'd never noticed. A pocket door. Inside, a narrow crawlspace lined with shelves. And on those shelves, boxes. Labeled in faded marker. Juliet's first tooth. Juliet's hair clippings. Juliet's crib sheet. One box was empty. Except for a note. She wouldn't stop whispering. We had to sedate her. It made the other one calmer. Kara dropped the note. She stared at the names, the handwriting, The dusty relics of a child she'd never met but had apparently shared a body with. Lived beside. Fought beside. Maybe against. She took the gown back down and burned it in the kitchen sink. That night, Dean brought her tea. She didn't drink it. He watched her too closely now. Asked if she was sleeping. Asked if she'd been drawing those things again. Asked if she remembered the incident in college, the one they never talked about. She asked him what incident he meant. He didn't answer. Instead, he touched her hand and said, "You're just going through another cycle. It always passes. Don't dig. Don't let it get louder." That night, she waited until he fell asleep. Then she checked his emails. It took her 20 minutes to find them. Correspondence with someone named CM, a woman with a university email address and a psychiatric specialty. They discussed Kara like she was a patient, not a wife. Words like hallucination resurgence, identity delusion, and potential resplitting event. They said she's regressing to pre-integrated states. They said if Juliet surfaces, Iris may be at risk. They said, be ready. The next morning, Iris was missing. The front door was locked. All windows shut. No sounds. No footprints. Dean was in the shower. He hadn't noticed. Kara called Iris's name until her voice broke. She found her in the attic, lying on the floor. Eyes closed. Face scratched. 3 parallel cuts ran down her cheek like claw marks. Shallow, but precise. Not random. Intentional. Beside her, drawn in charcoal, was another sketch. 2 girls. One smiling, holding a rabbit. The other crouched, hands red, face split in 2. Kara picked up Iris's limp body. The child stirred, murmured something. She said, she wants to be born again. Kara carried her downstairs, pressed a cold cloth to her face. The scratches stopped bleeding quickly. Dean asked if it had been the cat. They didn't have a cat. He asked if Kara had been dreaming again. Sleepwalking. He asked if she remembered the incident at age 9, the one with the scissors and the neighbor boy. She didn't. Not clearly. Just a red flash. A scream. A locked room. He told her she had a pattern. She told him to get out. He didn't. That night, she moved Iris into her room. She nailed the attic shut. She slept with a light on. She checked her fingers every hour. 3 days later, Kara began waking up with sketches again. New ones. Not hers. Pages filled with symbols. Rotating circles, fetal diagrams, Latin phrases she didn't know how to write. Her handwriting, but smaller. Crammed. Obsessive. The pages smelled like smoke. Then, the mirror in the attic shattered. Not cracked, exploded. She found the shards glinting in the floorboards. Blood droplets between them. A tooth lodged in the frame. It wasn't hers. Or Iris's. That night, she looked through old family photos, desperate to find proof, anything. One image stopped her cold. A photo from her first birthday. Her mother holding her, smiling. And in the background, blurred and half-shadowed, another crib. A second crib. She showed the photo to Dean. He said it was a prop. Something for symmetry. But he looked away too quickly. On Thursday, Kara found the envelope, taped to the back of her mother's framed wedding portrait. It held a single item, a hospital wristband. Worn. Yellowing. Juliet Marlowe. Infant B. There was no date. No discharge record. Just a scribble across the top in red ink. Internalized. That night, Iris stood beside her bed and whispered, "She's almost here. She just needs one more piece." Kara asked, "What piece?" Iris didn't answer. She only turned and walked slowly back to her room, as if someone were pulling her by invisible strings. Kara waited until Dean left for his showing. He kissed her forehead like nothing was unraveling and reminded her to rest, not research. His keys jingled like wind chimes as he walked out the door, whistling some song from childhood she could never name but always hated. Iris was at preschool. Just for the morning. Kara had told the teacher her daughter had been having night terrors, and that Kara needed a few hours alone to sort out some family paperwork. That wasn't a lie. She brought a hammer, a flashlight, and a bottle of water up to the attic. The light bulb had burnt out 2 nights ago, and she hadn't replaced it. Partly out of fear. Partly out of instinct. The mirror remained shattered, only its warped metal frame intact, propped crookedly against the wall like a broken jaw. She moved the bookshelf again. The crawl space behind it had grown colder, or maybe that was her. She pulled on gloves and stepped inside, the flashlight beam flickering over boxes, plastic bins, and a small rocking horse covered in dust. She knelt beside the far wall. Something didn't add up. The space felt deeper than the exterior of the house should allow. She pressed her hand to the wall. It sounded hollow. She pried at the wood with the claw of the hammer, bracing herself for mice, mold, or nothing. Instead, a panel popped free. Behind it, she found a narrow hallway. No drywall, no paint, just plywood and insulation and cold air. The hallway led 6 feet forward, then took a sharp left, like an unfinished passage designed by someone who didn't want it found. At the end, there was a door, a real one, painted the same color as her mother's bedroom growing up, pale yellow, with a porcelain knob shaped like a flower. Kara's fingers shook as she turned the knob. The room beyond wasn't large. 10 by 10. Low ceiling. One window, painted over from the inside. A small cot in the corner, crusted with age. A bucket. A child's desk. The wallpaper was peeling, bunnies and bears, but beneath it, carved into the plaster, were hundreds of lines. Tallies. Deep scratches. In the center of the room sat a wooden cradle. Inside the cradle, nothing. No mattress. No blanket. No doll. Just a lock of dark brown hair. And a drawing pinned to the inside wall with a rusty nail. The drawing was of 2 fetuses facing each other in a womb. One was smiling. The other had no mouth. There was a single word written in childlike script below. Remember. Kara sat on the floor, her breath shallow, her mind turning sideways. She'd seen this room in dreams. Not recently. As a child. A room she'd been told never existed. Once, at age 10, she'd told her mother she'd found a yellow door in the attic. Her mother had slapped her, harder than she ever had before or after. That same night, the attic had been locked for good. Until they moved into a new house. Until Kara forgot. Until now. There were no photos of Juliet. No birth certificate. No death certificate. Just evidence that she had been here. Hidden. Contained. Buried alive in memory. Kara wondered what it meant. Internalized. Had Juliet ever left this room? Or had she stayed in Kara instead? On the back of the cradle was a name etched with a pocket knife. Juliet. And beneath it, 1 girl, 2 minds. The wrong one. That night, Kara didn't sleep. Dean came home late. Claimed he'd been called to a late showing out in Barrington. Said he'd eaten already. Kissed her cheek like he couldn't smell the attic on her skin. She watched him undress. He didn't ask what she'd done that day. She didn't offer. But in the middle of the night, she woke to whispering. Not from Dean. From the mirror on her nightstand. Cracked just slightly at the edge. She didn't remember it being cracked. She leaned closer, not breathing. And in the warped glass, she saw herself. Smiling. Except she wasn't. The mouth was all wrong. Too many teeth. The next morning, Iris wouldn't eat. She said her stomach hurt. Kara sat with her on the couch, wrapped her in a blanket. Iris looked up at her and said, "She needs bones, Mommy. Not drawings." Kara felt her skin go cold. "What do you mean?" "She says if you don't give them back, she'll start taking yours." Kara called the preschool and told them Iris would be staying home indefinitely. She unplugged every mirror in the house. She unplugged her phone, her tablet, her laptop. She took the batteries out of the baby monitor, the TV remote, the thermostat. But the house kept humming. The heater turned on at 3:13 a.m. The attic door swung open at 3:17 a.m. The whispering returned at 3:19 a.m. She lay in bed, eyes open, listening. She no longer needed dreams. Her life had become one. Or maybe someone else's. Maybe Juliet's. It was Iris who brought her the bracelet. She held it out like a gift, cradled in her small palms with something like reverence. "Is this mine?" she asked. Kara froze. The bracelet was old, discolored vinyl, the print nearly worn off. But not completely. The letters were still legible, barely. Infant B, Marlowe, Juliet. Kara's stomach dropped. "Where did you get that?" Iris pointed toward the attic. "It was in the cradle. She told me to bring it to you. She said you'd remember now." Kara knelt slowly, her hands shaking as she took it. She turned it over. On the inside, someone had scrawled 2 words in tiny, jagged pen strokes. "You chose." She didn't know how long she sat there, staring at the band, until she noticed Iris was gone. She searched the house room by room, barefoot, wild-eyed, checking behind curtains and inside closets. Dean wasn't home. He hadn't been for hours. There was a message from him on the kitchen counter, scrawled hastily on a takeout napkin. "Dr. Chun wants to start early. Don't be alarmed. It's better this way." There was no number to call. No address. Just that. She tore the note in half. Then she ran to the attic. The panel was open. The The crawlspace lit faintly by a flickering bulb that hadn't worked in weeks. She called for Iris. No answer. Kara crawled inside, body shaking, mind spinning, clutching the hospital bracelet like a talisman. When she reached the yellow door, it was already ajar. Inside, the room had changed. The cradle was full now. Not with a baby. With bones. Small ones. Arranged carefully. Reverently. As if someone had been building her piece by piece. Beside the cradle stood Iris. Blank-faced. Silent. And in the shadows behind her, Kara stopped breathing. Because something was moving. Not walking, floating. A figure with no feet. A child shape. The same height as Iris. Head cocked too far to the left. Arms twitching like strings were pulling them from a distance. Her face wasn't a face. It was Kara's. But wrong. Too sharp. Too wide. Black holes where eyes should be. Teeth. So many teeth. Kara stepped forward. The figure flickered like a dying light. I didn't kill you, she whispered. I didn't know. But the figure smiled wider. I was never dead, it seemed to say, though no mouth moved. You just refused to carry me. A memory flooded her like cold water. Age 5. A hospital bed. Her mother crying. Doctors speaking in low tones. A dark shape on a sonogram. The phrase neural incompatibility. Her mother saying, if we remove the second one, the first will thrive. Kara's heartbeat was the only sound in her ears now. She remembered a surgery she wasn't supposed to remember. She remembered waking up and screaming not from pain, but from loss. She remembered something leaving her. I didn't choose, she said aloud, not to Iris or the ghost, but to herself. In the mirror behind the cradle cracked. One hairline fracture. Then another. The figure began to distort, twitch, split. A second reflection appeared, this one of Iris. But it too was wrong. Too still. Too calm. Kara understood then. It wasn't Iris that Juliet wanted. It was her. To finish the absorption. To be born again. Whole. The lights in the crawlspace blew out one by one. Darkness swallowed everything but the faint glow of the bracelet still clenched in Kara's palm. She knelt by the cradle. She placed the bracelet inside. Take it, she said. Take the name back. Take the body. Take what was yours. But leave her. The darkness paused. A ripple passed through the room like a drop stone. The teeth smiled. Then vanished. Iris slumped to the floor, unconscious. Kara ran to her, cradled her, sobbing. The child stirred. I had a dream, she whispered. You were a baby, and someone was trying to split you in half. Kara kissed her forehead. I know, baby. I know. She burned the cradle. She tore the room down piece by piece. She sealed the attic, nailed it shut, poured concrete into the crawlspace with her bare hands until her fingers bled again. She didn't tell Dean. He never returned. His phone disconnected. The psychiatrist never answered her emails. A week later, an unmarked envelope arrived in the mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Integration successful. Monitor for secondary fractures. Nothing else. No signature. No contact. She threw it in the fire. The mirror in the bedroom stayed covered. But sometimes, in the early morning light, she saw fingerprints on it. Tiny ones. Pointing inward. They told her the integration was stable. That word again, integration. As if she'd uploaded a file instead of surviving a haunting. As if absorbing a ghost, a twin, a buried version of yourself was some kind of software update. But Kara didn't argue. She smiled politely at the nurse with the clipboard, signed the release forms, and carried Iris out of the facility beneath a sky that looked just a little too clean. She'd spent 13 days inside. Maybe longer. She wasn't sure anymore. Time had melted. Some days she woke up feeling hollowed, like she was made of skin filled with fog. Other days, she felt so full she couldn't breathe. Like there was someone else inside her lungs, breathing too. Iris recovered faster. The scratches faded within a week. She stopped talking to mirrors. She no longer mentioned the girl with no eyes. No teeth. No name. She just called her the other one. Back home, Kara changed the locks. Painted over the attic door. Sold the antique mirror at a garage sale without blinking. She burned every drawing in her studio, every file from her tablet. She left her email unopened. Her agents were still waiting for new pages. She didn't answer them. Instead, she planted a garden in the backyard. Lavender, rosemary, honeysuckle. Things that filled the air with memory. She dug deep. Deeper than necessary. Sometimes she struck concrete. She didn't stop. She just kept digging. At night, she often dreamed of water. Not drowning, but submerging. Floating beside another body, identical but opposite. Sometimes they reached for each other. Sometimes they tried to tear each other apart. She always woke up gasping, her pillow wet with tears, or something colder. The therapist said it was trauma, that she was processing. But when Kara looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, she noticed her eyes had changed. Not the color, the shape, sharper, hungrier, and she smiled at herself without meaning to, as if someone else had pulled the muscles. One night, Iris asked her, "Mommy, do you think you're the same as before?" Kara didn't answer. She just kissed her daughter's forehead and tucked her in. But after Iris fell asleep, Kara sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at her own reflection in the oven door. And the woman inside smiled back. A second too late.